Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Christ is in our midst. Brothers and sisters, today we have this gospel of the rich man who pulls down his barns and puts new ones up so he can store the full harvest that he has been blessed with. It's also the Sunday right before Thanksgiving. And a lot of times people travel on Thanksgiving and they're not here on the actual day when we celebrate the Eucharist for the feast. So it is a feast in many ways. So I thought I would offer you a reflection on Thanksgiving, and it's always a good thing to kind of come back to this topic because it's a deep, rich topic of Thanksgiving. And you know that the word that the church uses for our common life together, what we celebrate on Sundays, is the Eucharist. And this is a Greek word. When you meet Greek people, when they want to say thank you, they say Evharisto. It's just right out of their language. And it's a Greek word which means to give thanks. And at its root is this word charis, which is where we get the word charismatic, grace. It's a gift, and it's an awareness of being gifted, of having great gifts received. That's what Thanksgiving means, that we have a kind of awareness of what the extent of our wealth really is. And when we are not thankful for something, there's a problem there. It's a problem of understanding. It's a problem of perspective, that we don't really see what is right in front of us, what we have been blessed with. And so when the church calls us to gather together on Sundays, because it's the day of the Lord, it's the day of the resurrection, we ought to be thinking and sort of connecting these dots that we are here today because of the resurrection. We are here today because of this great gift that we have received of new life in Christ. And that new life ought to be the thing that is making us well up with a sense of thanksgiving, because we got something that we didn't deserve and something that we desperately need. So we ought to be aware of that. But I think if I went around the room and asked everybody, I'm not going to do this, but so you don't have to be worried, but if I was to do that, and if I said to you, when you come here on a Sunday, for you, is this like an experience of paradise, of going back to when Adam and Eve were in paradise, and every single thing they needed was given to them, and they didn't even have any clothing on because they didn't recognize the need for that? Would you have that experience? Would you have any kind of experience that would be similar to that of coming to church being like going back into the Garden of Eden and experiencing that incredible gift of grace, that overwhelming love of God for you and His mercy and His forgiveness, just like pouring out all over you and lifting you up and making you, filled with joy and gladness and feeling good about yourself as well, because you know that God loving you, in spite of whatever misgivings you have about yourself, knowing that His love is there for you, does that mean anything to you? And I think, and I can't go into your heads and see what you are, each of you, thinking now, obviously, but I think that for most of us, coming to church on Sunday and gathering for this great love feast, which is what the word Eucharist means in a lot of ways, or we use sometimes the word agape, which literally means the love feast. I think a lot of us would say, no, it's not like that. I don't have that experience. If we would be honest about it, it's more like a routine. It's a formality. We go to church when we are able to, or when we want to, when it's convenient. We don't consider it like a necessity, really, or something that has like a burning urgency associated with it. And I think it would be very helpful for us to look back at our lives and to ask ourselves maybe why it's not an experience that's something like being in paradise for us. You know, we have a very formal style of liturgy. And I remember once when I was looking to buy a house with my wife. Of course, we were with the realtor, and we were going around from house to house. And we went to a tiny, tiny little house. It was almost like a dollhouse. I mean, it was bigger than that, but it wasn't much bigger. And it had a tiny little yard and a fence. And we went in. There was not much to see. A couple of rooms, but they were all small. And I said to the realtor, who would want to buy a house like this? I mean, it's like a mouse house. It's just so tiny and really wasn't very welcoming of a place. And he said, you really have to think about where the person is coming from. He said, you know, if you're coming from a bigger house, coming to this house might be not really what your cup of tea is, you know, maybe not what you're looking for. But if you're coming from an apartment where you don't have any privacy, you don't have any, you know, washing machine or dryer or things like that. Here, you have a little bit more, even though it's small. And so it really made an impression on me. I realized that there's a sort of a connection between, there's a context in which things that don't look so good, might be even better than I could imagine they would have been. But, you know, I think that for people who are born into the Orthodox faith and who grow up with the Byzantine liturgy that we enjoy, that we celebrate, it's our patrimony here. We don't always have that experience because we aren't coming from anywhere else. We just know the same thing over and over again. So it becomes like mind-numbing to us. You know, it's a complicated ritual that is formal and it's dignified, but it could become so routine that it loses something in that process. Maybe if we went to other churches every now and then. I'm not suggesting we do that, but if we were to do that, we would get a different experience. Maybe if you were standing in or sitting in an auditorium on folding chairs. I know we have some folding chairs here, but that's just because of COVID. If you were sitting on metal chairs in an auditorium and the only music was a guitar, or maybe there was even no music, nothing sung, and it was just rattled through, maybe then when you came here, you'd say, wow, it's really beautiful, it's really full, it has a lot of depth to it, you know, but it's not just the ritual though. It's what we bring with us when we come to that ritual. How much are we willing to invest in it, and how much are we willing to, of ourselves, are we willing to share? You know, if you come here and you're kind of in a selfish, stingy mode, and you're not really giving, then you're not going to get much either, because you haven't really understood, in a certain sense, what liturgy is, because it's a group effort. It's a group. The choir demonstrates this the best because they are constantly giving, they are working, they are sharing, and I think that that's why it's such a gift, it's such a ministry, and such a blessing to be in the choir. But all of us ought to come here with the sense that we have something to give, and that we are expecting more of ourselves than just to kind of come here with the idea that I should get I should be entertained. I hope the sermon is good, because otherwise it's going to be boring, and I don't want to hear anything about history or the 3rd century or anything like that. But every week I've been going to see Fred Fekowitz, Fred is in hospice care now, and he has a very limited avenue open to him in terms of what he can do. He can't drive. He's he's got to stay pretty close to home. His health is not good, and he doesn't have a lot of strength. He can't play tennis or anything like that. He's struggling because of the physical limitations that he has, and sometimes he has pain, and it's always a challenge for him. Every day is a challenge for him to find something about that day that is going to be good and uplifting and wonderful for him, when the things that he has to look forward to are limited, very, very limited. And for anybody who is in a situation like that, where we have physical suffering, we have physical limitations, it's very hard, and it's mentally hard to get past that and to see that, okay, even if I can't do a various number of things, I'm still alive, and I still have the possibility of communicating with other people. Sometimes people don't even have that. Sometimes they can't even talk, but they have to find meaning and purpose and joy in the very small little things that they can do, or can see, or can think about. I remember when Father Michael got sick. He went through a really difficult time coming to terms with the changes in his own body, and how he couldn't do the things that he wanted to do. And eventually he kind of settled on one thing, was a micro garden, where he had a tiny little, pot or something like that, or a terrarium next to his bed with little plants in it, and he could water them. And he could watch them every day, and they changed a little bit, they grew, and it was something for him. Now you might look at that and say, well, poor guy, he had nothing, so at least he had something to keep his mind on. But I think that would be the wrong way to look at it. Rather, we could look at it that he simply had to change his focus from bigger things to smaller ones. But there were still important things. The little plant in that pot growing was an evidence to him of life and of the possibility of change, so that even if he couldn't change his physical situation, he could change his spiritual situation. He could change his mind, and he could grow and be more open to God's grace. So there are things that we can do, even if we face all sorts of limitations and sufferings, to use those things in a constructive way. But often, we don't want to do that, because we are stuck on the things that we don't have anymore, because we are focusing on this kind of self-centeredness that is part of our human nature, but we don't have to allow it to control everything. And in our society, it's like the optimist, the classical optimist says the glass of water is half full, and the classical pessimist says the glass of water is half empty. But it's like our society is filled now with people who are optimistic and pessimistic, and they're fighting over the glass of water, about what it constitutes. And in the process of this battle between them, they end up spilling the water, and there's nothing left. And this is where we are as a society, we are brought into intense conflicts with each other. And we don't even recognize people anymore as sacraments. We just see them as either adversaries because they don't agree with me, or they're on my team because they agree with my point of view on something, and they tolerate them. But I don't really relate. We have stopped relating with each other, even in a human way. Never mind with a sort of a theological understanding of what our humanity is all about. But our humanity is this, it's almost like a sponge which is capable of absorbing and retaining the moisture of God's grace. And we ought to soak that up, and we ought to have an abundance of that, so that when we come into contact with other people, we can mediate that grace, and they can get that moisture from us as well, because there's no shortage of it. Instead of salvation, which is this huge gift that has come to us, we want to save things. We want to save money. We want to save our property. And we see other people as competing with us to get those things and to take those things away from us. It's a kind of a psychological insanity that has gripped us as a society, as a nation, as a world, where everybody is somehow opposed to me. And so there's no longer any kind of commonality, no longer any kind of humanity that really unites us, until some kind of, I remember at 9/11, people started to treat each other with a little bit more respect and a little bit more dignity. And that was a nice thing for the couple of weeks or months that it lasted, and then it went, and it's been gone for a long time. So this idea of the Eucharist and of thanksgiving is extremely important, and it's extremely important for Christians because it's at the absolute center of what the work that Jesus Christ performed was, because he came here to show us a better way than what we just described. His way was a way of giving. He gave his life, and he freely embraced our humanity in all of its ugliness. And he embraced it in a way so that it could even kill him. And he allowed it to kill him in a very inhumane, in a very horrible way, with all of its indignity and suffering. And he took all of that negativity and accepted it. And he didn't complain about it and say, this isn't fair. I shouldn't get this treatment. He said, it's fine. He just accepted it. And he did that precisely to show us a different way of relating to life and to suffering. A way of thanksgiving. A way to bless things and to transform them so that we could experience them as paradise, which is what they're meant to be, paradise. But we don't often allow that to happen. And it's a question of the will. It's a question that each of you has to think about. Where am I on this question, on this topic? Am I willing to accept God's love, his grace, his mercy, his forgiveness, and the fullness of life that he wants to imbue me with? Or am I going to continue to reject that? So many people don't accept that there is such a thing as sin. But there is this rejection of God's love and of his mercy that is the clearest proof of sin in the world. And we prove this, each of us, we prove it over and over again, every week, every day. We offer guaranteed proof of what sin is in our lives. And we won't admit that. we won't repudiate it, and we won't change, because we are too accustomed to this way of living. It's what we are comfortable with. We don't like change, and we don't want to be honest about ourselves. But the Eucharist and Thanksgiving depends upon us being honest with ourselves. It depends upon us having a true perspective on what existence is, what we really have in front of us, what gifts and of what grace is given to us. So instead of being filled with a spirit of negativity and adversity, we ought to be filled with a spirit of love and of openness, of thanksgiving for all things, and realize that is in embracing those things, even suffering, with a spirit of thanksgiving, we transform them and we change them, following God's will to the things that they are truly signposts about. That God is our true God, that He is the creator and source of all being, that He loves us, that He has taken the necessary steps to heal us, to bring us into communion with Him, that He has given us everything that we need. And so when we gather here for the Eucharist, we should be filled with a very strong sense of blessedness, a strong awareness of how fortunate we are, and a willingness to share that grace with everyone who's here and everyone who's not here. Aware always of the great gift that we receive when we follow Christ as one of His followers. Amen.